When a quiet neighbor found himself compelled to investigate the pristine house next door, no one could have guessed the horrifying discovery that would follow. What began as a simple curiosity about a new family turned into a nightmarish tangle of secrets and silent pleas for help. Before we dive into this harrowing journey, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe no secret should remain hidden, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories that uncover the darkest corners of everyday life. Mr. Patel had lived on Maplewood Lane for close to 10 years. It was a cozy street, lined with family homes and blooming dogwood trees in the spring, and he liked it that way. The people were mostly friendly but not overbearing. A simple wave or nod across the fence served as the neighborly greeting, and everyone seemed content to let others live in peace. Mr. Patel, in particular, valued his solitude. He was an accountant who worked from home, partly because the quiet helped him concentrate, but also because he'd never been one for bustling crowds or noisy offices. That was how he'd come to notice oddities that most neighbors might have overlooked. He had a small, meticulously kept garden in his backyard, filled with marigolds and roses. They reminded him of his mother's garden back in India, a space he had played in as a child. There was an almost meditative routine in watering those flowers, ensuring their growth, and quietly observing the goings-on around the neighborhood. It was during these gardening sessions, around early spring when the weather was turning pleasant, that he first saw something peculiar at the new house. The Carvers moved in on a weekend afternoon, driving a large moving truck. Mr. Patel, in the middle of weeding his flower beds, had straightened up to see them. They appeared to be a middle-aged couple, Mr. Carver tall and slender, Mrs. Carver short and pixie-like with a neat bob. From his vantage point, Mr. Patel watched the couple move boxes, greet the other neighbors who wandered by, and otherwise settle in. At a glance, they looked pleasant, if maybe a bit too polished. Their fences were painted white, their hedges trimmed to near perfection within days. A large wreath hung on their newly installed door, and colorful flowers in pottery-lined planters accentuated the walkway. At first, Mr. Patel felt relieved that new neighbors were so devoted to appearances. He liked well-maintained homes, they kept property values from dipping, and they were a welcome sight from his own backyard. But something about the Carvers' constant show of friendliness made him uneasy. They waved at everyone as if on stage. They never missed a chance to smile and exchange pleasantries, yet rarely did they engage in deeper conversation. Mr. Patel shrugged it off initially. He had no reason to suspect anything sinister, but over the next few weeks, that vague discomfort lingered. One Saturday, as he was returning home from the grocery store, he glanced over and saw a slight movement on the Carvers' porch. At first, he thought it must be one of them tidying up. Instead, it was a boy, thin, pale, and with the posture of someone bracing for a blow that might come at any moment. He wore a sweater that hung off his bony shoulders, far too large for him. When he caught a glimpse of Mr. Patel, the boy quickly lowered his head, arms wrapping around his torso. Mr. Patel raised a tentative hand in greeting, but there was no response. Days passed, and Mr. Patel's attention was drawn back to that porch more often than he cared to admit. He never saw the boy outside again, though occasionally he would see a shadow behind the front curtains. The Carvers once casually mentioned the boy, Leo, when Mr. Patel's curiosity led him to make small talk. They said he was a foster child, placed with them due to some trauma. The explanation was delivered in clipped, polite tones. "He needs space," Mrs. Carver explained, that bright smile not quite reaching her eyes. She mentioned therapy sessions and the complexities of dealing with a traumatized child. Mr. Patel listened politely, not wanting to pry, but the encounter left him unsettled. There was a strange dissonance between her perfectly crafted words and the memory of that fearful figure on the porch. He tried not to dwell on it. His work demanded meticulous focus, and tax season was ramping up. Still, some days he would step outside, glance at the Carvers' windows, and wonder what might be going on behind those expensive blinds. Sometimes, in the late afternoons, he would see Mr. Carver arrive home in a sleek black sedan. The man would exit the car, check his surroundings, and hurry inside. Rarely did Mr. Patel see them bring groceries in or take the garbage out. It seemed improbable for a household with a child. Then came small, unexplained events. The garbage bin out front was perpetually empty on collection day, even when a week had passed. Late at night, a few times, Mr. Patel thought he heard something, maybe voices raised in anger or sudden, sharp noises. But the sounds stopped almost as soon as he noticed them. He tried to push away the creeping thoughts, reminding himself that every family has its secrets. Yet that sense of unease gnawed at him. Weeks later, in the hush of a post-midnight silence, Mr. Patel was roused from sleep by a muffled cry. At first, he thought it was just a dream. He sat up in bed, blinking into the darkness, waiting to see if the noise returned. The air was still. Then he heard it again, faint, agonized, and undeniably human. He could feel the hair on his arms stand on end. Throwing on a robe, he tiptoed to the window that overlooked the carver's yard. The street lamps offered a dim wash of light, enough to see shadows moving behind their curtains. His heart pounded. Unsure what else to do, he slipped on his shoes and headed outside. He moved slowly, mindful of every step on his gravel walkway, trying to remain unseen. At the shared fence, he leaned in, ears strained for any clue. The wind rustled the leaves of the hedge, and the suburban night closed around him like a suffocating blanket. Then he heard it, a drawn-out whimper, as if someone were trying not to scream too loudly. Mr. Patel fumbled his phone out of his pocket. With trembling hands, he began recording. At first, only the quiet hum of the night was audible. Then came the metallic scrape of something heavy being dragged. Then a dull thud. His pulse throbbed in his ears. He considered calling the police right then, but he worried they might dismiss it as a domestic argument or question his imagination. So he waited, phone still recording, hoping to capture one more incriminating sound. Minutes passed. Another whimper. A short shriek. Then, the high-pitched squeal of metal on metal. It sounded like a cage door slamming shut. Fear coiled in Mr. Patel's stomach. That single noise told him everything he needed to know. He ended the recording and dialed 911. When the police arrived, they were courteous but initially skeptical. Two officers, one older and stockier, the other young and tall, stepped out of their cruiser. Mr. Patel showed them the phone recording, voice quavering, pointing to the house next door. The older officer pressed his lips into a thin line. "It's faint," he said, "but let's go have a look." They approached the carver's front door, knocking loudly. Mr. Patel lingered by his fence, phone in hand, uncertain whether to stay or follow. After a few attempts, the door finally opened. Mrs. Carver stood there in a robe, hair tousled, eyes narrowed in annoyance. She claimed she had been asleep and that her foster child, Leo, was upstairs. The boy, she insisted, was fast asleep. The older officer politely asked if they could take a look around to ensure everyone was okay. Mrs. Carver's face hardened. "Not without a warrant," she said stiffly. "There's no need for this. I have a sleeping child in here, and you're disturbing us. Go talk to my husband if you like. He's upstairs." She made no move to invite them in. The younger officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we've got a neighbor with a recording that suggests someone might be in distress." Mrs. Carver's face faltered only slightly. "Nonsense. There's been a mistake," she insisted. "Leo has nightmares sometimes. Perhaps that's what your neighbor heard. But he's perfectly fine." Mr. Patel watched this exchange, anxiety clawing at his insides. He worried the police might leave, that they would accept her explanation. But to his relief, the younger officer asked for a copy of the recording. "I'll have to show this to my supervisor," he explained. Mrs. Carver grudgingly agreed but ended with, "I want you off my property. This is harassment." The officers left to discuss their next steps, and Mr. Patel hovered by his mailbox, a swirl of dread in his chest. He had done what he could, but it seemed as though nothing might come of it. Yet, to his surprise, about 40 minutes later, more police cars appeared. Their lights strobed in the night, painting the Carver's porch in flashing red and blue. This time, they carried a warrant. Mr. Patel stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around himself for warmth, heart hammering as they forcibly opened the garage. Shouts erupted from inside, followed by horrified exclamations. Then the paramedics arrived, rolling out a stretcher. It all happened in a blur. He saw the boy, Leo, hauled out of the garage, pale and trembling. He was wrapped in a large blanket someone had given him. A plastic water bottle was pressed to his lips. He was too exhausted or frightened to speak. Mr. Patel's stomach turned when he glimpsed what the officers pulled out next. A dog kennel, large enough for a person, a dirty tarp, and some old blankets. The entire sight made him sick. The Carvers were quickly escorted away in handcuffs. Mr. Carver shouted something about lies and overreacting, while Mrs. Carver wept, claiming they had done nothing wrong. The officers didn't pay them much mind. They were far more focused on Leo, who slumped against a paramedic's shoulder as they helped him into the ambulance. In the aftermath, Mr. Patel found himself giving a statement to an officer. He explained how he had recorded the suspicious noises, how he'd grown concerned over the weeks by the odd lack of garbage, the seldom-seen child, and the dreadful sounds he'd finally captured that night. The officer asked for his phone, transferring the audio files for evidence. Mr. Patel felt a shaky relief mixed with overwhelming sadness. Leo was safe now, but the memory of that cage would not leave him. Even as the police tape went up around the Carvers' property, and the ambulances drove away, he stood on the curb, too stunned to move. Sleep eluded him for the rest of that night. He stared at his bedroom ceiling, replaying the images in his head. The police rummaging through the garage, the boy's haunted expression, the Carvers being led away in cuffs. He wondered how long it had been going on and why no one else had noticed. Guilt ate at him. Should he have said something sooner? Could he have saved Leo from weeks or months of mistreatment? The next day, local news vans arrived, though they left quickly when they realized the Carvers were already in custody and the boy had been taken to the hospital. Neighbors whispered among themselves, faces drawn and pale, casting wary glances at the sealed-off property. Some expressed shock, others claimed they had suspected something was off. A few stared accusingly at Mr. Patel, as if wondering why he had intruded on private matters. But the consensus was mostly gratitude. At least one person had had the courage to speak up. In the days that followed, Mr. Patel learned more details from a social worker who visited his home. She explained that Leo's file had been incomplete due to a mix-up between local agencies, and that the Carvers had taken advantage of the lack of proper oversight. They had told Child Protective Services that the boy was too disturbed to attend school, forging daily logs to indicate improvements in his condition. No one had questioned them thoroughly. Leo's experiences in prior foster homes had been rough, so he often kept quiet and didn't protest. It was a perfect environment for the Carvers to inflict their cruelty without scrutiny. They're facing serious charges, the social worker confided. Child endangerment, unlawful confinement, and that's just for starters. She also mentioned that Leo was being kept in emergency foster care for the time being. Mr. Patel realized, with a pang of sorrow, that Leo had nowhere safe to go. He thanked the social worker for the information and asked if there was anything he could do. She mentioned that Leo liked to draw, that art therapy was being introduced to help him process the trauma. Mr. Patel took that to heart. A few days later, he bought a quality sketchbook and some colored pencils. He wasn't sure if it was allowed, but he asked the social worker if he could drop them off. She seemed hesitant at first, uncertain about the rules, but eventually allowed it after verifying with her supervisors. Mr. Patel remembered how timid the boy looked, how he'd clung to that blanket. He wanted Leo to have something that belonged to him, even if it was just a sketchbook. He arrived at the emergency foster center, a drab building with a sterile lobby. After signing in, he was asked to wait. The minutes stretched uncomfortably as he stared at motivational posters and plastic plants. Finally, a staff member told him, gently, that he might see Leo for a brief moment if the boy felt comfortable. Mr. Patel's heart pounded. He wasn't even sure what he would say. He only knew he had to do something to let Leo know he wasn't alone. When Leo emerged, guided by a caseworker, Mr. Patel was shocked by how small the boy seemed. He was 12, they said, but looked closer to 9. His eyes had dark circles underneath them, and his hair was unkempt. He shuffled forward, gaze cast downward. Mr. Patel held out the sketchbook and pencils, voice trembling a bit. "These are for you," he managed to say. "I heard you might like to draw." Leo lifted his eyes just enough to see the items, then softly took them. He looked up at Mr. Patel, fear mingling with curiosity. It was the first time Mr. Patel had seen the boy's eyes in proper light. They were a deep, dark brown, tinged with disbelief. He mumbled a quiet "thank you" before stepping back. That small interaction stayed with Mr. Patel for days, playing over in his mind as he tried to return to normal life. He found himself waking up in the middle of the night, imagining the boy locked in that kennel, the door squeaking shut, day after day. He pictured the Carvers scolding him for not staying quiet. A slow boil of anger simmered in his gut. He'd never considered himself a vengeful person, but if the justice system somehow failed, he feared what that rage might drive him to do. Each time the phone rang, he jumped, half expecting it to be the police with news of the Carvers or the social worker with an update on Leo. His appetite dwindled. He found himself skipping meals as his mind lingered on the possibility of child abuse going unnoticed in other homes as well. He took solace only in the small hope that Leo was now out of danger. He thought of the Carver's yard, now overgrown with weeds, a place so carefully maintained once. It seemed symbolic, an illusion of perfection shattered overnight. About 2 weeks later, Mr. Patel got another call from the social worker. She thanked him again for the sketchbook and mentioned that Leo had started to use it. "He's drawing some very intense images," she confided, "but he seems grateful for the gift. It's something that's his, something he can hold on to." Mr. Patel felt a flicker of relief. He asked if he could bring more supplies or even visit again. She paused, then told him that they usually discouraged visits from non-family members, but given the situation, she'd discuss it with her supervisor. Meanwhile, Mr. Patel's extended family, who lived in different parts of the city, caught wind of the story. A cousin called him. "Are you insane, meddling in other people's affairs?" The cousin scolded, worried that the Carvers might take revenge upon release, or that it could drag Mr. Patel into a lengthy legal battle. Others commended him for doing the right thing. Their voices clashed in his head. Mr. Patel often found that staying silent had been easier when the Carvers were just odd new neighbors. But after what he'd witnessed, there was no going back to that peace of mind. He told his concerned cousin that yes, perhaps it was risky, but he couldn't have lived with himself if he'd turned a blind eye. One of the officers handling the case paid a visit to Mr. Patel's house. Detective Sanchez was a tall woman with a stern demeanor, but a kindness in her eyes. She asked Mr. Patel if he remembered any details that might help build the case against the Carvers, unusual comings and goings, the number of times he saw Leo, anything. Mr. Patel shared everything he could recall, from the empty trash bins to the flinches Leo gave whenever the front door opened. The detective nodded, scribbling notes in a pad. "This is going to be a tough one," she admitted. "Child abuse cases can be complicated, especially emotional and psychological abuse. It helps that we have the physical evidence from the kennel, the recording, and the condition Leo was found in. But the defense will likely argue it was all for the child's safety." Her face twisted in disgust at the very idea. Mr. Patel gritted his teeth. "How could they possibly justify a child in a cage?" he asked. Detective Sanchez sighed. "You'd be surprised at the excuses people come up with." Days turned into weeks, and Mr. Patel continued to check in with the social worker, who occasionally allowed brief updates. Leo was still in emergency foster care, adjusting slowly. He had begun counseling. One day, Mr. Patel was told that Leo had asked about him, specifically, if Mr. Patel was the man who gave him the sketchbook. That small inquiry sparked a gentle possibility in Mr. Patel's heart. Perhaps the boy felt a hint of trust toward him. As the investigation into the Carvers intensified, more details emerged. They had been under suspicion in another county, but the case never panned out due to lack of evidence. It appeared they had moved around, taking in foster children, using them for state stipends, and discarding them when agencies got too close. The story made local headlines. Couple charged with child abuse, found locking foster child in dog kennel. It was horrific, but Mr. Patel was grateful the press was shining a spotlight on the issue, hoping it might prevent other children from suffering a similar fate. During this period, Mr. Patel found it difficult to concentrate on his work. Numbers and spreadsheets no longer provided the solace they once had. He spent much of his free time researching the foster care system, reading about the legalities and the heartbreaking stories that resembled Leo's. One evening, he found himself looking at adoption resources. It felt like a leap. He was single, middle-aged, with no experience raising a child. But the thought lingered. If Leo had nowhere else to go? Their next meeting came unexpectedly. The social worker asked Mr. Patel to stop by the emergency foster center again, explaining that Leo had been having trouble sleeping. He refused to speak to other foster families. He was uneasy around adult men in general. But something about Mr. Patel's gesture with the sketchbook had left an impression. The staff wondered if a short visit with a familiar face might help. Mr. Patel's nerves ignited. He agreed immediately. He arrived on a rainy afternoon, drizzle coating the car windows. This time, the staff took him to a small recreation room. Toys sat in bins, the walls were painted in bright colors, but there was a sense of clinical order. Leo was there, hunched over a table, scribbling furiously in the sketchbook. Mr. Patel cleared his throat softly. "Leo," he called. The boy's head snapped up, eyes wide. There was fear, then a flicker of recognition. He eased the tension in his shoulders, though he remained guarded. "You're the neighbor," Leo said, voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me." Mr. Patel approached slowly, wanting to avoid spooking him. "I'm not sure I saved you," Mr. Patel replied gently. "I just made a phone call that night." Leo stared at him for a moment, then set down his pencil. He was working on a rough drawing of two houses side by side, one immaculate, the other slightly unkempt. In the middle, a chain-link fence. Mr. Patel felt a lump form in his throat. They sat in silence for a while. Mr. Patel was content to let Leo speak first if he wanted. Eventually, the boy mumbled about how the Carvers always told him no one would believe him if he spoke up. They said he was a problem child. They said social services didn't care if another foster kid disappeared. Mr. Patel carefully assured him that those were lies. "There are people who do care," he said, his voice steady. "Some people might fail you, but not everyone." Detective Sanchez, the social worker, me, were all trying to help. Leo seemed unconvinced but nodded slowly. He closed the sketchbook, rubbing his eyes. It was too much for him. Mr. Patel didn't push. He simply reached out, placing a gentle hand on the table. "If you ever want to talk, or, if there's anything you need, I'll do what I can." Leo gave a tiny nod. Back home, Mr. Patel felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. He began to wonder if anyone else would ever adopt Leo, or if he'd spend his teenage years bouncing from one foster home to another. The boy's withdrawn nature and trauma made him a challenging placement. The social worker confirmed as much, cautioning Mr. Patel that healing would take a long time. Despite the monumental uncertainties, Mr. Patel found himself fantasizing about offering Leo a permanent home. As the months rolled on, the Carvers' trial date crept closer. Mr. Patel was called to testify, and he dreaded the moment. He knew he would have to recount the night he heard those screams and made that recording. He also worried about facing the Carvers in court. What if they tried to deny everything or twist his words? Detective Sanchez reassured him, reminding him that Leo's testimony, if he chose to speak, would be the strongest piece of evidence. But it was uncertain whether Leo could handle the emotional strain of a courtroom. In the midst of this tumult, Mr. Patel found solace in small acts of kindness. He started donating old clothes to the emergency foster center, included a few more art supplies in their donation bin. He took care to ask the staff which items Leo specifically liked, pastels or watercolors, bold markers or fine pencils. It became a ritual of sorts, a way to stay connected without overstepping. Leo improved in modest increments. The social worker told Mr. Patel that the boy spoke more in therapy, though still rarely. He expressed fear that the Carvers might come for him, that he wasn't truly free of them. The nightmares kept him awake. But when he drew, he found a way to channel those terrors onto paper. Mr. Patel saw a few of those drawings, dark silhouettes looming in doorways, a tall man with an unrecognizable face. The images unsettled him, but they also reminded him just how strong Leo had been to endure all that. In time, Leo began to ask for Mr. Patel's visits. The staff extended an invitation. Mr. Patel could come by once a week if his schedule allowed. He never missed a single opportunity. He'd arrive after his workday, sometimes bringing a modest snack, fruit or crackers, that Leo might share. They didn't talk about the abuse too often, though at times Leo would let slip a detail that turned Mr. Patel's stomach. Instead, they focused on small talk, favorite cartoon characters, the kind of dog Leo would want someday, or random jokes. Bit by bit, a fragile bond formed. Meanwhile, the Carvers sat in jail awaiting trial, unable to post the high bail set by the judge. Rumors circulated that they planned to claim they were implementing special therapy for Leo's own safety. Mr. Patel seethed at the idea. He poured that anger into cooperating with the prosecution. He turned over every note, every recollection he had. He provided a statement about the unusual cleanliness of their trash, the frequent flinches he witnessed, and, most critically, that agonizing recording. He also learned that the prosecution would call paramedics who'd found Leo, the pediatric doctors who examined him, and the neighbors who sometimes heard odd noises. It was going to be a robust case, but still, nothing felt guaranteed. Child abuse cases, he learned, could be complicated by technicalities and cunning defense strategies. When Leo's guardianship status came up, the social worker explained that he was officially up for placement again, but no prospective families had shown interest yet. His age and trauma history worked against him in the foster system. After a long night of weighing pros and cons, Mr. Patel made a decision. He asked the social worker what it would take for him to become Leo's guardian. The process was not simple. She explained that fostering with an intent to adopt required classes, home evaluations, background checks, and an extensive period of review. The older single-father figure scenario might raise eyebrows with certain agencies. But not once did Mr. Patel waver. This new journey consumed his life. He signed up for the classes, endured numerous interviews, and poured every spare bit of time into preparing his home for a child's needs. It felt surreal, buying a bed for Leo, stocking a small bookshelf with children's and teen novels, ensuring the house had safety measures. Each step was both exhilarating and terrifying, as Mr. Patel questioned whether he was truly prepared to care for a boy who had experienced such deep trauma. Still, the more he contemplated it, the clearer it became, if Leo wanted it, Mr. Patel would do whatever it took to provide a stable home. In parallel, the legal case advanced. Mr. Patel dreaded the day he'd take the stand, but that day arrived. He dressed in a modest suit, heart pounding as he walked into the courthouse. The Carvers were there. Mrs. Carver's eyes were bloodshot. Mr. Carver's face was grim. Their lawyers were a polished pair who occasionally threw condescending looks at Mr. Patel. The prosecutor, a kind woman named Ms. Bradley, reassured him that all he had to do was tell the truth. He recounted his story, how he'd observed the boy, the nights he thought he heard disturbing noises, the final push that led him to record what he'd heard. The defense tried to paint him as a meddling busybody, an overzealous neighbor who jumped to conclusions. But Mr. Patel held firm, describing the sequence of events calmly. The pivotal moment came when the recording was played in the courtroom. The sounds were faint yet undeniably chilling, the whimper, the metallic clang, the short scream. Though it lasted only a few minutes, it felt like an eternity. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft hum of the recording. When it ended, the tension in the air was palpable. He stepped off the stand feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. He felt the searing stares of the Carvers, but he also felt a wave of quiet empathy from the jury, who seemed shaken by the audio. In the hallway afterward, Miss Bradley patted his shoulder. "You did fine," she said, offering a small smile. "Just a little longer now." Leo was not called to testify, sparing him the trauma of facing the Carvers. Instead, they used recorded testimony taken in a carefully managed setting, along with the testimonies of doctors who treated him. After a few more days of arguments, the prosecution rested. The defense tried to frame it as a misunderstood therapy method. They insisted that Leo had a history of self-harm and that the kennel was a specialized holding area, but the evidence and the neighbors' accounts shattered that excuse. Pictures of bruises, conflicting explanations, and glaring inconsistencies in the Carvers' logs painted a grim reality. Ultimately, the jury deliberated for less than a day. They returned with multiple guilty verdicts, child abuse, false imprisonment, and several other charges. The Carvers would not see freedom for a very long time, if ever. Mr. Patel was in the courthouse room when the verdict was read. He sank into his seat, relief flooding him in a warm wave. Justice, at least in the eyes of the law, had been served. But the story was far from over. Leo was still in a precarious situation, and healing was a journey of many steps. Mr. Patel continued with the fostering classes and the rigorous process of becoming an adoptive parent. He welcomed every background check, every home visit from caseworkers who scoured every corner of his house to confirm it was safe. Over time, he became more and more involved in Leo's life. The boy began to trust him enough to share short stories about the other foster homes he'd been in, how they were never truly home, how he often felt like a guest in a stranger's world. Months passed. Leo moved from the emergency center to a transitional foster placement. Mr. Patel prayed daily that the final approval for him to foster the boy would go through. Whenever they spent time together, they found small things to bond over: drawing, cooking simple meals, or just quietly reading in the same room. Leo never demanded Mr. Patel's attention, but Mr. Patel always made sure the boy knew he was available. One evening, while sorting through some old clothes, Mr. Patel felt his phone buzz. It was the social worker. "Congratulations," she said. "Your fostering application has been approved. You can take Leo home in a couple of days, provided he's comfortable with it." Mr. Patel, breath stolen, could barely speak. He knew there would be a trial period before any adoption was finalized, but this was a monumental step. "Thank you," he finally managed. The day Leo moved in, Mr. Patel's cozy, orderly house felt at once too small and too large. He had set up a bedroom upstairs, painting the walls a gentle shade of blue. A small wooden desk, the bed, and bookshelves lined the walls. Leo walked in, looking around with uncertainty. He carried a single duffel bag. The social worker lingered, explaining a few last-minute details, then left. The boy stood in the doorway, not quite stepping inside. "You can decorate it however you want," Mr. Patel said, trying to put him at ease. "We can get posters, maybe some plants, or more shelves for your art supplies." Leo nodded, biting his lip. Then he took a tentative step forward. He set his bag down on the bed and ran a hand over the comforter, as though verifying it was real. Mr. Patel hovered in the hallway, giving him space. Eventually, Leo walked out and looked at Mr. Patel. "Thank you," he said softly, tears welling in his eyes. It was the first time Mr. Patel had seen him openly show emotion. He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, and the boy did not flinch. Adjusting to life together was an emotional roller coaster. Some days, Leo was sullen and withdrawn, triggered by small things, like the clang of a garage door closing or the sound of dogs barking in a neighboring yard. Mr. Patel learned not to press too hard, offering gentle reassurance instead. Other days, Leo was bright and inquisitive, asking about recipes Mr. Patel made or the old photographs in his living room. Slowly, they developed routines: morning breakfasts with toast and fruit, quiet afternoons where Leo did some drawings while Mr. Patel worked on his laptop, evening walks around the block when the weather was mild. Leo's therapy sessions continued, and sometimes after them, he would retreat into his room, shutting the door firmly. Mr. Patel respected that space. He discovered scribbled notes and half-finished drawings later, expressions of fear or anger, but also glimpses of hope. A sketch of a dog with a wagging tail, a small house with a fence and the sun shining overhead. A recurring request emerged in Leo's artwork: a dog. He drew them in every shape and size: floppy-eared hounds, tiny lap dogs, majestic shepherds. "Have you ever had a dog before?" Mr. Patel once asked. Leo shook his head. "No," he answered quietly. "But I always wanted one." Mr. Patel felt a surge of determination. He promised Leo that once they were more settled, they would look into adopting a dog. The boy's eyes lit up. Summer came, and with it new challenges. Leo faced nightmares regularly, waking up drenched in sweat, sometimes calling out in terror. Mr. Patel would rush to his room, heart hammering, to find the boy trembling. Some nights, all Mr. Patel could do was sit beside him until he calmed down. Other times, Leo pushed him away, desperate for solitude. Patience became Mr. Patel's closest ally. He reminded himself that trust took time to build. After all, Leo had endured unimaginable cruelty from people who were supposed to care for him. Meanwhile, the Carvers tried to appeal their convictions. Mr. Patel received a letter, an official notice about the status of the appeals process, but he chose not to dwell on it. They had been sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Even if they filed every appeal possible, it would not change the evidence that had damned them. The nightmares would not vanish for Leo, but at least the Carvers were unlikely to walk free anytime soon. Slowly, Leo opened up a little more about his past. He revealed that he'd been moved between different foster families since he was 8. His biological parents' rights had been terminated due to severe neglect. He had siblings scattered in other placements, but he'd lost contact with them. His voice trembled when he spoke of the Carvers. They had seemed nice in the beginning, feeding him well for the first few days. Then they started restricting his movements, punishing him for minor mistakes. Eventually, the cage appeared, accompanied by threats that if he told anyone, no one would believe him. As Leo spoke, Mr. Patel felt tears well in his own eyes, a wave of protective fury surging within him. He silently vowed never to let the boy experience such terror again. The final step, adoption, remained a lengthy process. Psychological evaluations, home checks, and countless forms stretched out over months. Mr. Patel poured all his spare energy into ensuring everything was in order. He had never considered fatherhood before, especially not in this manner, but each day with Leo reinforced his desire to provide a permanent home for this child. The social worker noted that Leo's progress seemed tied, in part, to the stability Mr. Patel offered. The boy did better in therapy. He built more confidence. He even ventured to a local park a few times, tentatively interacting with other kids around his age. Though he remained guarded, these small victories felt monumental. True to his word, Mr. Patel took Leo to a local animal shelter once the boy settled in. The staff led them down corridors of kennels filled with hopeful, wagging tails. Some dogs barked excitedly, others whimpered. Leo walked slowly, observing them with quiet fascination. He paused at a kennel where a medium-sized brown mutt lay curled in the corner, tail thumping softly. The dog had warm, expressive eyes and seemed neither too hyper nor too fearful. Leo crouched down, pressing a hand gently against the chain link. The dog rose, sniffed his fingers, then licked them through the fence. Mr. Patel spoke to a shelter worker. "What's his story?" The worker explained that the dog, named Milo, had been surrendered by an owner who couldn't care for him anymore. He was mild-mannered, good with children, but had been overlooked by many prospective adopters because he wasn't a pure breed. Leo didn't care about any of that. He saw an overlooked, shy creature, just like him, and something in his eyes softened. Without hesitation, Mr. Patel arranged the adoption. Bringing Milo home was another major step. At first, Leo worried that the dog might bark at him or reject him. But Milo accepted Leo almost instantly, following him around, curling up at his feet when he drew. In turn, Leo took on small responsibilities, feeding, brushing, and helping with walks. Their bond grew, a gentle reassurance to the boy that not every presence in his life was a threat. Through the summer and into autumn, their household found a rhythm. Leo enrolled in a local school with an individualized education program, IEP, to accommodate his emotional needs. Initially, he was withdrawn in class, but a supportive teacher helped him adjust. Mr. Patel was there every morning, making sure he had lunch packed, and there every afternoon, ready to ask how his day had gone. Some days were bad. Flashbacks during class, anxiety attacks that forced him to leave early. Other days were good. New friendships with a couple of kind classmates who invited him to sit with them at lunch. Each small step forward felt like a victory. Meanwhile, the new neighbors who moved into the Carvers' old house attempted to restore the property, but for a long while, it remained empty. Rumors of the past occupants' crimes lingered in the neighborhood. Eventually, a contractor purchased it, planning to flip it. Mr. Patel watched from his porch as workers tore out old flooring, repainted walls, and tried to breathe new life into the building. The bright facade that once concealed such darkness was stripped away. It seemed symbolic, a cleansing of malevolence. Finally, nearly a year after the traumatic night that changed everything, Mr. Patel stood in a family court, with Leo by his side. A judge presided over the proceedings with a calm authority. The hearing was the culmination of endless paperwork, interviews, and checks. Despite the formal setting, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Leo clutched Mr. Patel's hand, not wanting to let go. When the judge officially granted the adoption, it was a moment so quiet and profound that time seemed to stand still. Leo looked up at Mr. Patel, tears forming at the edges of his eyes, and then he did something rare. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Mr. Patel squeezed his hand in return, his own eyes brimming with emotion. They left the courthouse together, father and son in every sense but blood. Outside, autumn leaves fluttered in a crisp breeze, golden sunlight illuminating the path ahead. Leo slipped his hand out of Mr. Patel's, wiping his tears on his sleeve. He said nothing, but he didn't need to. The relief on his face was enough to speak volumes. Mr. Patel drove them home, reflecting on how much had changed in the past year, an entire life turned upside down, then slowly rebuilt on a foundation of trust and patience. Their home now had the gentle chaos of any household with a child and a dog. The living room table was scattered with art supplies, old homework sheets, and dog toys. Milo dozed in a patch of sunlight on the rug, occasionally lifting his head to watch them. Leo hung new pictures on the refrigerator door. One showed two figures, a tall man in glasses and a boy wearing an oversized sweater, though in the drawing, that sweater was bright, almost glowing, rather than drab and oppressive. Another showed a dog kennel set in the distance, with a bold red X over it, while a small house with a picket fence stood in the foreground. The images told the story of what they'd overcome and the hope that now guided their future. Though Leo still had difficulties, he no longer feared nights spent alone. He had a comfortable bed, a desk for his drawings, a window looking out onto a street that felt safer than it once had. He continued therapy, Mr. Patel right beside him, helping him navigate the nightmares that lingered. Sometimes, the boy would wake up gasping, certain that the Carvers were back to reclaim him. On those nights, Mr. Patel would sit by his bed, gently reminding him that the law had locked away that danger. Step by step, Leo found the courage to believe it. In time, Mr. Patel recognized that he, too, had changed. He was no longer the solitary man who kept to himself. He had become someone who cared deeply, who looked out for a child's well-being, and who understood the difference a watchful eye could make in a life. The neighbors greeted them warmly now, especially after the story of Leo's adoption circulated. Some even offered to help with grocery runs or to babysit if needed. A sense of community replaced the once lonely hush on Maplewood Lane. One late afternoon, as the sun set over the neighborhood, Mr. Patel found Leo in the backyard, leaning on the fence, gazing at the empty yard next door. The Carvers' property had been spruced up, but it remained a silent shell, up for sale once again after renovations. "Does it scare you?" Mr. Patel asked gently, stepping up beside him. Leo shook his head, but his eyes were distant. "No," he finally answered. "It just feels weird. Like I can't believe I was ever there." Mr. Patel draped an arm over the boy's shoulders. "That life is gone," he said softly. "You have a new one now." Leo turned to him, offering a tentative nod. "I know," he said. "It's just, I don't want other kids to, you know." Mr. Patel understood. They couldn't rescue every child in a bad foster situation, but they could do their part to raise awareness, to remain vigilant. "Sometimes," Mr. Patel ventured, "just doing what you can, where you are, is enough. We try to keep our eyes open. Sometimes that makes all the difference." Weeks passed and leaves began to fall from the trees. The new normal settled in with occasional flashbacks to the pain of the past. Leo kept his old blanket from the kennel, folded neatly in his closet. He never used it, but he didn't want to throw it away either. "It reminds me that I got out," he explained one day, meeting Mr. Patel's eyes with a seriousness beyond his years. Mr. Patel simply nodded. He understood that objects could hold power, both painful and affirming. On the anniversary of Leo's rescue, Mr. Patel quietly remembered the fear that seized him that night, the frantic phone call, the relief when the police finally arrived. He found Leo in the living room, absent-mindedly petting Milo, who rested his head on the boy's knee. "Can we do something today?" Leo asked hesitantly. "What do you have in mind?" Mr. Patel replied. Leo shrugged. "I don't know, maybe make something to eat that we both like, watch a movie?" Mr. Patel smiled. "We could do that." They cooked a simple meal together, an Indian curry Mr. Patel loved, with mild spices so Leo could enjoy it too. The house filled with a comforting aroma of simmering onions, tomatoes, and fragrant seasonings. Milo wandered into the kitchen, sniffing the air, tail wagging. They ate at the small dining table, the overhead light casting a gentle glow. Leo took a few bites, nodding in approval. Mr. Patel's heart warmed at the sight of the boy's contentment. Later, they watched a light-hearted movie, though Mr. Patel barely paid attention to the plot. He was more enthralled by the boy who was learning to trust again. By the time winter arrived, they had fallen into a pleasant cycle. School days, therapy appointments, evenings at home. Mr. Patel occasionally took Leo to meet some of his extended family. Though initially shy, Leo discovered kind cousins who accepted him, doting aunts who found ways to make him laugh, and an unending supply of homemade sweets during holiday gatherings. The laughter Leo shared with these new relatives provided further evidence that the darkness was receding. Finally, the day came for the formal adoption to be recognized in a more public sense. Although the legal aspect was already sealed, Mr. Patel arranged a small gathering at the local community center. A few close neighbors, some relatives, and the social worker who had guided them came to celebrate. It was a modest event. A few balloons, some trays of food, and a big, handwritten banner that read, "Welcome home, Leo." The boy walked in, wide-eyed, not used to being the center of attention. But as soon as he saw the beaming faces, he broke into the biggest smile Mr. Patel had ever seen on him. Milo trotted by his side, wearing a little bandana. Leo didn't make a speech, but when he approached Mr. Patel, he wrapped him in a tight hug. The onlookers applauded softly, some wiping away tears. In that moment, it became clear how far they had come. The same child who once flinched at a raised voice now stood calmly in a room full of people, trusting enough to show affection. Afterward, Mr. Patel and Leo returned to their house. By then, the Carver's home had finally sold to a new family who seemed eager to put the past behind the property. Life on Maplewood Lane carried on with an easy kind of grace. Mr. Patel's work returned to a stable rhythm, but he made sure never to let it overshadow Leo's needs. They still had good days and bad days, but now they faced them together. Over time, the boy blossomed academically and socially. He made a few steadfast friends, joined a small art club at school, and even participated in a local art show. Every now and then, Mr. Patel would catch Leo quietly examining his old blanket in the closet, or staring at the new fence the neighbors installed. He never asked too many questions. He recognized that Leo's memories formed a scar, not an open wound. The boy needed space to process them in his own time. On a chilly afternoon, some 2 years after Leo first arrived, they took Milo for a walk around the neighborhood. Snow flurries drifted lazily, dusting the sidewalks. They passed the Carver's old house, which was now painted a different color and had a swing set in the yard. A small child giggled, pushing a friend on the swing while a watchful parent stood nearby. Leo paused to look at them, but there was no fear in his expression, only a curious acceptance. Then he smiled up at Mr. Patel. "It's good that new kids can play there, without—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Mr. Patel placed an arm around his shoulders, giving him a gentle squeeze. "Yes, it is," he said softly. "It is." They continued down the street, the cold air nipping at their cheeks, Milo trotting alongside. The once harrowing memory of that house receded into the background, replaced by a sense of peace. Eventually, they returned home, stepping into the warmth of their living room. Leo hung up his coat, patting Milo on the head. "Dad?" he said quietly, using the title more often these days. Mr. Patel turned around, smiling. "Yes." Leo's eyes glistened with a mixture of gratitude and something far deeper. "Thank you," he said, voice trembling slightly. "You saved me." Mr. Patel took a breath, swallowing back a wave of emotion. He ruffled Leo's hair. "No," he replied gently. "You saved yourself. I just helped." Much later that evening, they sat together, looking through old drawings and photos. The ones from the beginning, dark scribbles of cages and shadows, contrasted sharply with the recent sketches of Milo chasing a ball, or a bright sunrise behind a simple home. Leo lingered over each image, occasionally explaining the moment it represented, how he felt at the time. It was a quiet reflection on a journey from despair to hope. As Leo grew older, the trauma never vanished entirely, but it lost its power to dominate his life. He learned coping mechanisms in therapy, found new interests at school, and discovered he had a knack for digital art. Mr. Patel supported him every step of the way, attending school meetings, celebrating each achievement, no matter how small. They became, in every real sense, a family. And in the hush of a peaceful evening, as Leo drifted off to sleep in his own bed, beneath a ceiling hung with glow-in-the-dark stars, Mr. Patel paused at the doorway. He remembered how this all began, with a sleepless night, a muffled scream, a gut feeling he couldn't ignore. He realized that sometimes the greatest changes in life come from moments of acute discomfort, when one is forced to acknowledge that something is terribly wrong and chooses to act. He whispered a silent prayer of gratitude that he had acted, that the system had worked this time, and that Leo had found a place to call home. The Carvers' story ended in a prison cell, their pristine facade stripped away by the weight of truth. Their house, once a symbol of false perfection, now stood as a normal home for a normal family, unburdened by secrets. Meanwhile, Mr. Patel's home brimmed with life, a dog, a growing boy, and a father who would never again overlook the silent signs of suffering around him. If you found this story moving and believe in the power of uncovering hidden truths, we invite you to like and subscribe for more narratives that shine a light on the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.